Welcome to our channel. Are you tired of building web apps that look like they were made in the 90s? Well, today we are going to change that. We're going to explore the world of static files and learn how to add CSS to our Python web apps. Let's dive in. In this tutorial, we are going to cover the following topics. What are static files and why do we need them? How to add CSS to our Python web app, how to link our CSS file to our HTML template, and finally, we're going to customize our CSS to make our web app look amazing. We'll be using Python, Flask, and VS Code for this tutorial. If you don't have VS Code installed, feel free to use any other IDE you prefer. So what's static files? Simply put, static files are files that don't change dynamically. They are served as is by our web server. Examples include images, CSS files for styling, JavaScript files for interactivity, and more. Without static files, our web applications would be plain and unstyled, just raw HTML with no personality. Let's take a look at this code. Here we have a simple Flask app that renders an HTML template called index.html. But where do we put our static files? That's a great question. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, let's talk about why we need static files in the first place. Imagine visiting your favorite website. It has colors, images, buttons, and animations. None of that would be possible without static files. We need static files because they help us separate our presentation layer from our application logic. Think about this. Our HTML template should only contain markup, not styles or scripts. That's where our static files come in. Now that we know why we need static files, let's talk about how to add CSS to our Python web app. We'll create a new folder called static in our project's root. And inside that folder, we'll create a new file called style.css. Okay, let's dive into this code together and see what's going on. First, here's the CSS file we are going to create to style our HTML template. Inside our style.css, let's start with the first rule. This is styling the body tag of your HTML page. The body is the main section that holds everything visible on your web page. Here we're setting the background color of the page to light gray. This gives our page a clean, neutral background. Next, we're setting the font family to Arial, and if for some reason Arial is unavailable, we'll fall back to any generic sans serif font. That ensures text looks consistent across different devices. Now let's take a look at the second block of CSS. This rule applies to the H1 tags, which are typically used for headings. We are changing the color of our headings to a nice blue shade. This makes the header stand out and gives the page a clean, modern look. Okay, now that we have created our CSS files, the question is, how do we link this file to HTML template? Well, we need to use a special HTML tag called the link to connect the CSS file to our HTML. Alright, now that we have our CSS file ready, let's link it to our HTML template. To do that, we'll use the Flask URL_for function. This function helps us generate the correct URL for our static files like CSS. We'll update our index.html template to include a link to our style.css file. Let me show you how that looks. First, we have the basic structure of our HTML document with the doctype HTML tag declaration and the opening HTML tag. Inside the head section, we add the title tag, which defines the title of our web page. This is what appears on the browser tab. We can call it My Web App here, but you can name it anything you like. Now here comes the important part, the link tag. This is how we link the CSS file to our HTML. Notice the real equals style sheet attribute, which tells the browser that we are linking to a style sheet. But what's key here is the href attribute. Instead of just writing a simple part like this, we use the Flask URL_for function to dynamically generate a URL for our static file. We tell Flask to look for the static folder and find the style.css file inside it. So this tag is how Flask constructs the right URL for us, making sure the app can find the CSS file no matter where it's hosted. Finally, in the body tag, we have our H1 tag with simple message, welcome to Python Central. This is where we display our heading on the page. So once we run our app and open it in the browser, Flask will load the HTML template and the CSS file will be applied to our page. Our styles will now show up, giving the page a polished look. And that's how we link our CSS file to HTML template in Flask. Simple, right? Of course, we can customize our CSS to make our web app look amazing. We can add more styles, use different fonts, and even add animations. Let's see how we can make our page even more dynamic with just a few changes. Here we start with the body tag, where we define the background color as a light gray and set the font family to Arial, with sans serif as a fallback. This keeps our page looking clean and readable. But now we're adding a little extra flair. We include the transition property, which tells the browser that when certain properties change, they should do so smoothly. Here, we're telling it to animate the background color property over 0.5 seconds with an ease timing function. This means the color change will be gradual and not instant. Now here comes the fun part. We've added a body hover rule. This is where the magic happens. When someone hovers their mouse over the page, we'll change the background color to a vibrant blue. But thanks to the transition we set earlier, the color change isn't jarring. It happens gradually and smoothly. So what's going to happen now? When we run our app and move our mouse over the page, the background will slowly change from light gray to blue. This adds a nice interactive feel to the page without any complex code. And that's how easy it is to add some smooth interactive elements to our CSS. Just a few lines and you've got a dynamic effect that enhances the user experience. And that's it. We've successfully added CSS to our Python web app using static files. We've learned how to create a static folder, add a CSS file, and link it to our HTML template. Before we wrap up, let's quickly go over some common issues you might encounter when working with static files in Flask. In this snippet, we are setting up a basic Flask app. Let's walk through it step by step to understand what might cause some common problems. First, we import Flask and render_template. These are essential for running our Flask app and rendering HTML templates like index.html, which we will serve to the user. Then we create a Flask app instance with this. Notice the static_folder equals static path. This is important because Flask needs to know where your static files are stored. By default, it looks for a folder named static in the root directory of your project. If your static files aren't in the folder named static, this might cause issues. Next, we define our route with the decorator app.route. This tells Flask to load the index.html template when the user visits the root URL of the web app. We use the render_template to render the HTML file. This is where the magic happens. Flask sends the index.html page to the browser. Finally, we have the usual if block, which runs the app in debug mode. This allows us to see errors in the terminal and automatically reloads the app when we make changes. So one potential issue that might arise here is not specifying the correct static_folder. If your app isn't finding your CSS or image files, check that you've set the right folder for your static files. In this case, Flask will look in the static folder, so make sure it's named correctly. Another common issue is file path mistakes. Ensure the file names and extensions match exactly. For example, this versus this, because file paths are case sensitive. That's it for some common issues with static files. With just little attention to detail, you can avoid these simple mistakes and keep your app running smoothly. Now that you've learned how to add CSS to your Python web app, what's next? You could try adding more static files like images or JavaScript files. Or you could experiment with different CSS frameworks like Bootstraps and Materialize. Thanks for watching. If you like this tutorial, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. We've got plenty of other tutorials in the works, including how to add user authentication to your Flask app. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all our latest tutorials. See you in the next video.